Right now, your body is destroying millions of cells. Seriously. And not because something's wrong, but because that's exactly how you stay alive. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're looking into a process that's happening inside you at this very moment.
Literally every single second, millions of cells inside of you are dying. I know, it sounds a bit like science fiction, right? But it's your actual biological reality.
Inside you, these tiny biological executions are happening completely silently. Think about it. Damaged cells, old cells, even cells that could potentially mutate and become cancer, they're all just being quietly eliminated. And if this process were to suddenly stop, your body would literally collapse.
Section 1. The language of cell death. Essential vocabulary for biological survival.
Okay, before we really dive into the mechanics of this terrifying yet amazing biological process, let's gear up with some essential English vocabulary. First up, we've got apoptosis. This literally means programmed cell death. So, in a sentence, you might say, apoptosis helps the body remove dangerous cells. This is absolutely the core scientific term we'll be exploring today.
Next, we have mutate. Simply put, this means to change genetically. As a real-world example, you could say some cells mutate and become harmful. You know, this directly connects the everyday activity of your cells to the risk of serious disease.
Now, to balance out all that destruction, we need the word regenerate. This means to grow or replace damaged tissue. For instance, human skin can regenerate over time. It just goes to show the body's unbelievable capacity for self-renewal.
Then we have collapse, which means to suddenly fail or break down. A good example here would be, without balance, the body could collapse. It perfectly captures the sheer drama of what happens if our internal systems just give out.
And finally, eliminate, meaning to remove completely. So you might naturally say, the immune system eliminates threats.
Moving on to Section 2, Mechanics of Controlled Destruction. Let's look at how a cell gracefully ends itself.
You know, most of us probably imagine the human body as this really stable, finished thing, but actually, scratch that. Your body is way more like a massive city under nonstop construction and demolition. Things are constantly being built and constantly destroyed. And that brings us to how apoptosis actually works. Basically, a cell gets a very specific chemical signal telling it, hey, your job here is done. But instead of just dying randomly and becoming a toxic mess, the cell takes itself out peacefully. First, it receives that death signal. Then, its very DNA just breaks apart. After that, its entire physical structure collapses. And finally, these specialized cleanup cells called macrophages swoop in and clear away the debris. It's this incredibly dignified, orderly self-destruction, and it is happening inside you right now.
So all this brings up a pretty big question. Why is this seemingly terrifying process so absolutely crucial for your survival? I mean, at first glance, mass cellular death sounds horrible, right? But the reality is, without it, you wouldn't survive at all.
It turns out, apoptosis gives us some incredibly vital, life-saving benefits. It's what removes damaged cells, prevents cancer, clears out old cells to make room for new ones, and even fights off infections. But maybe the most mind-blowing part? It actually helps physically shape the human body during early development.
Seriously, check this out. Before birth, human fingers are actually connected together. They start out fully webbed. It is apoptosis that systematically kills off the cells between them, essentially carving your fingers apart. That is literally how you got your individual fingers. Crazy, right?
Section 3. Cancer. The cellular rebellion. Let's talk about what happens when cells stop obeying death signals.
Here's the scary truth. Every single day, some cells inside you mutate. Now, most of these are totally harmless, but some of those mutations can turn into the ultimate biological villain. See, on one hand, we have normal apoptosis. That's where mutated or dangerous cells are flagged, and they peacefully eliminate themselves. They follow the rules. But on the other hand, we have the rebellion, cancer. Cancer becomes a massive threat exactly when these cells just stop listening to the death signals. They completely ignore the body's checks and balances and just keep growing uncontrollably, even when they're supposed to die. That refusal to self-destruct, that is one of the foundational mechanics of cancer.
Section 4. You are constantly transforming. The biological reality of regeneration.
Taking a step back to look at the big picture, your body is regularly swapping out staggering numbers of cells. Skin cells die and flake off. Blood cells constantly renew.
The cells lining your intestines are replaced completely every few days. But I should add a quick scientific caveat here so we're being totally accurate. While most cells do replace themselves, it's not every single one. For example, the neurons in your brain? Those generally stick with you for your entire life, so you aren't completely swapped out from head to toe, but a huge majority of you definitely is.
Because of this endless cycle of demolition and rebuilding, even though you might feel permanent and solid, your body is in a state of continuous physical reconstruction. You literally are not the exact same person you were a few years ago. Biologically speaking, you are constantly transforming.
Okay, let's take a quick second to practice some advanced English sentences from today's explainer. I really encourage you to pause for a moment and repeat these out loud to work on your pronunciation and fluency. Ready? Sentence 1. Apoptosis protects the body from dangerous cells. Sentence 2. The human body constantly regenerates itself. Sentence 3. Some mutations can lead to cancer. And Sentence 4. Millions of cells die inside the body every second.
Which brings us to a really profound, kind of philosophical thought to wrap up today's lesson. Survival sometimes requires destruction. We've learned something today that's equal parts fascinating and, well, a little terrifying. Your body survives only by actively destroying parts of itself to maintain health and balance. Without this highly controlled cell death, life itself just wouldn't work. Because survival isn't just about keeping absolutely everything alive. Sometimes, survival means knowing exactly what needs to end. Which kind of makes you wonder, right? What parts of your own life might you need to let go of in order to keep growing?
If you loved learning advanced English through some truly mind-bending science in today's explainer, make sure you hit subscribe to Mastery of English, because around here, we don't just memorize English, we actually experience it through ideas that completely change the way we see the world. Thanks so much for diving into this biological journey with me today, and keep exploring.